For this presentation, I am going to do a counterterrorism briefing, the new era of hostility. Why did I choose to put the new era of hostility in there in my presentation, basically right below the title? Well, it's making a reference to the new challenges that we are facing as a nation. What do I mean by challenges? Well, our enemies present a new threat. Why? Because they're better communicated. They're using technology to their advantage. Just the same that we are able to communicate with our family members on the other side of the country, just by a phone call or a text message. Just the enemy can do that same thing. They can communicate between each other, even if they're far away, because communication is widespread. So naturally, this is going to create a challenge as they can organize better. And this is why I call this phenomenon the new era of hostility, because these challenges that we are facing are pretty new. So as we dive into the presentation, I will provide more detail into what I mean by the new era of hostility. To start off, I will be mentioning the main factors of this analysis. One is going to be our border security. Second is going to be our very, very relaxed visa standards, which I will be going into more detail. And our third factor is going to be our extremist groups. So in this slide on the left, I have a very famous show, which is called Border Security: America's Front Line. I just recommend it. It is very good. It provides insight on a lot of what Border Patrol and Customs and Borders does, and just the things that they find, right? That can be very dangerous if they come into the country. And then for a second picture, we have a Border Patrol agent scanning for threats right in the border. This is where the criminals sneak in. And this is where the human trafficking takes place. And on the right, I have a logo of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So as I go into more detail about these, we will be understanding why these three factors make this issue a more serious threat than it is. And for our next slide, we have South Border Security. And what do I mean by South Border Security? Well, their inability of Border Patrol agents to do their job is going to come first, because they are limited. The catch and release policies of these individuals. For example, the court dates assigned instead of a deportation. So this is naturally going to create an inability of the Border Patrol to be efficient. I remember an interview that was being done to a Border Patrol agent, to the leader of the Border Patrol agents, and he stated that, well, we are a law enforcement agency. We enforce the laws. Any issue that you have with the border, etc., is something that we only enforce the laws that the politicians, the representatives, put in place. Because many people are angry at the Border Patrol agents for doing the job, for enforcing the law that we vote for on the politicians. Over here on the left, I have a picture of the agents apprehending individuals, including children, illegals trying to cross by. On the right picture, same thing, just an uncontrollable flow of immigration coming from our south border. Which, from a counterterrorism standpoint, of course is going to be an issue. It's going to be a big issue, due to the nature of the fact that we do not know who these people are. And I added a slide with information, with some data, just so we can provide our references of what I am talking about. On the left, I have a graph which shows how to handle immigrants living in the United States illegally. The majority of the population says to be eligible for citizenship. 24% of the people say be eligible for permanent residency, and 27% state that they should not be allowed to stay legally. On overall, 71% say that there should be a way for them to stay legally. Now, this is where my analysis from an intelligence standpoint, sometimes, because I am Latino, sometimes we hear that people commit crimes over there. Let's just say Mexico. Somebody does a horrible thing in Mexico, and they'll cross the border and they'll come here. Why? Because now their record is clean. So my question is, for the 71% of people that say that there should be a way for them to stay legally, we do not know who these people are, and we do not know what background check they had in El Salvador, because El Salvador doesn't have a system in place. So my question is, how do we ensure that the people staying here legally have a clean background check, a clean criminal record? And what do we do about the people that are here illegally that commit crimes, both serious felonies and, let's just say, misdemeanors? Drunk driving. The first drunk driving incident is not a felony. What do these pro-immigrants say when we start to ask those questions? And on the right, I have the unauthorized immigrants population in the United States. Just for reference, most of the illegal immigration will be coming from Mexico and Central America. Mexicans alone make about 53% of the estimated 11.3 million unauthorized immigrants in the US. Which naturally makes sense because Mexico's a poor country. It's the closest one. Makes sense. Not to mention that Mexico has immigration too on their south border, and they don't let anyone in. So that's also something to consider. Now, on our second point of relaxed visa standards, I say this because visa overstays outnumber illegal border crossings. So yes, we have a problem at the south border. No one can deny that. That being said, our visa overstays are just as big of a problem, if not bigger. Why? Because the Middle East is close to Europe, and these extremists in the Middle East can get to Europe easier and easily. So they can obtain documentation there and obtain a visa to come here. Background check? Probably the government of Afghanistan doesn't have a whole lot of systems to make sure people have a clean background check. So when they commit crimes over there and they escape, then the European government is not going to be able to find that in a background check. For this reason, because we have relaxed visa standards, we will be exposed to those countries that want to exploit our relaxed visa standards, because it's going to be easier for them to come in here. And this is clear proof. We have an astronomical amount of visa overstays, which means we are not doing a good job in handing those visas out, clearly. Or else we will have less overstays and people will go back. Our process is not performing the way it should. There should not be any visa overstays, really, if we are doing our job properly and vetting these people, that they're not going to stay here illegally. But we are handing out visas like candy, and this is going to come back to us because we sometimes aren't sure the people that are coming here. And for proof of that, I have a picture here of the different visa types to travel to the United States. So we have tourism and visits, of course. We have business. We have employment visas, which there's many of them. We also have study and exchange. And to immigrate, we have family visas. We have inter-country adoptions. We have employment again. And we have a diversity visa, which is the biggest issue here is the diversity visa. The diversity visa, and which is not included here, the visa lottery system. Both representing a big issue because the visa lottery system is just random, as the name implies, lottery. You just randomly get it. And I met somebody actually from Venezuela recently that received that. Just going about their everyday normal lives. I will not be able to say here if they applied or they did not. But he told me that they just got selected. And hey, you have a visa now. He's like, do I? Well, at least from an intelligence standpoint, I see an issue with that. Of course I do. Of course, this presentation can go either way with the next group. Violent extremists in general. We can speak domestic terrorism, we can speak overseas terrorism, but because of this presentation is speaking about the southern border and our weakness in the visa lottery system, for the purposes of this presentation, I will be concentrating more on violent overseas extremism. I understand lone wolf terrorism is going to be an issue. I understand domestic terrorism is a big issue. But for the purposes of this presentation, we will be concentrating on overseas Islamic style terrorists. Of course, we need to keep in mind that these organizations, these groups, as the name implies, terrorism, try to terrorize the population. So what these groups want to do is get their message across as efficiently and as fast as possible. Because this is naturally what they do. They have an ideology. And by having our borders exposed, both our physical borders and our international ways to get here, such as the visa, the documentation required to get here, and such, these groups can actually take serious advantage of the weakness that I have presented. And this is why I have them here on my presentation. Of course, I can speak solutions all day long, things that I believe are going to help. But before we do that, we need to identify the challenges presented. I mean, the southern border, political-wise, it is a show. Just saying that the border is going to be more secure is incredibly controversial. And yes, it might make sense from an intelligence standpoint. Yes, it does. But political-wise, we need to remember that the politicians want to get votes. And they are going to say the things that naturally get them the most votes. And, of course, as we see on the bottom left, the deficit, the already huge loans that we have, our national debt is in the sky. And securing the border is going to have its expense. Hiring Border Patrol agents, hiring CBP, having a secure border. Many will argue that it is an investment. Yes, it is. But we also must keep in mind our budget constraints, if we do have them. And if we are going to spend more, how much is the taxpayer willing to spend more on higher security? Just to say that is going to also be controversial. For that matter, and for this presentation, what I'm saying is absolutely there's no constitutional barrier to the solutions that I have presented. More border security, stricter visa requirements, visa standards, and our Constitution allows for the solutions that I'm presenting. This is not something that it's basically, this is not a pipe dream. It's something that we can do. We have the power to do, both constitutional wise, and many states have the willpower to do this. The federal government is going to be questionable, but we can do it if we want to as a nation. Of course, for this analysis, I have identified the most prevalent topics that I see today, the most relevant. By no means this is a list that is all-inclusive, naturally. And we have more challenges to face. Cyber terrorism is a big deal. Domestic terrorism is a big deal. The recent soldiers that have leaked out secret US information is also a big deal. So a presentation can be made on multiple things. This is what I have identified as being, if not the most important, at least top 3 of the issues that I find the most prevalent today. And of course, as always, there's my sources page with really good articles. I really like the Visa Overstays report by the DHS and the Border Security Metrics report by the DHS, also recently updated too. It speaks on the metrics for securing the border on the ports of entry, on land, on the water operations. Talks about the drug seizures, and privately owned vehicles, commercial vehicles, transportation of both narcotics and human trafficking, even frequency of secondary inspections. So how many people are being inspected multiple times? Very, very nice article. The Visa Overstays report also goes into detail on which countries are overstaying, what percentage of the visa waiver system is overstaying, the diversity visa, what percentage of them is overstaying. So it provides really good insight. I enjoy these sources. I enjoy reading about them. And well, this was my presentation. Thank you for listening.